he wasn't fully in control of himself. And I don't think British people want that as their Prime Minister. So I think he is less likely to be Prime Minister now than when he got up to make that speech.
Hello and welcome to How to Win an Election. Once again, we've had to turn on our bat signal. We project the shape of Blackpool Pier into the sky. And Sally, Polly and Danny have answered. They've come sliding down the pole of political strategy into the bat cave of news. Because Nigel Farage has said he will resign as an MP, triggering a by-election in Clacton. Danny, this is a bold move. What's your reaction?
Well, he's trying to gain control of the situation. And that's clever because voters like politicians to be in control of the situation. But I'm yet to discover whether this is really going to work, going to put him in control, because what he's also doing at the same time is amplifying a story that might otherwise not have reached a lot of people, because people don't follow these stories in and out. And now we're going to have quite a lot of hoo-ha around the fact that he's received £5 million, what he calls a lottery win, which most people don't receive, and his relationship with George Cotterill, which I think will be less damaging to him than the £5 million, mainly because people aren't that interested in these kind of intricacies of scandal, but they can work out that he's got £5 million and they haven't. This thing of having a by-election in Clacton, well, it doesn't prove anything, obviously, if he gets back. I think he'll find that he's taken quite a risk with not as much reward as he thinks. I think he's going to find it difficult pitching this as the establishment against the people, actually. And if he wins at the end, what are we all going to say? Oh, well, now Clacton have voted for you twice. The most reform constituency in the country has re-elected you. That means that none of this happened. I mean, it's not going to say that.
Similarly, Labour, like all the other parties, has been hammering Farage since the Sunday Times reported on the support given to him by the convicted criminal George Cotterill. Will they feel like they've been forced onto the back foot right now, like he's flipped the tables?
I wouldn't have thought so particularly. I'm rather where Danny is. I think it feels to me like he's done this to an extent out of pique. I think partly yes to gain some level of control, because he felt, for very unusually for him, he didn't feel like he was in control of the narrative, and he found that very irritating. Clearly, I think he's trying to divert attention, but kind of the facts are the facts. And I know facts nowadays are considered rather boring, but actually there are facts out there, and in the end, I think that will come through to people. And I think it does make it harder for him to maintain the, I'm the victim, I'm the little man against the establishment, when you've been given £5 million and you're also sort of dealing with somebody who's been locked up for money laundering and hangs out in Montenegro. So I just think that's really very alien to a lot of his potential voters. And I think the other thing is he thinks it's all going to be fine, because that's what happens when Trump does this sort of thing. And we aren't the States. We are actually different. Thank heavens. I still think, no matter how much he would wish otherwise, we are different. And so I think this is pretty high risk for him, actually.
He clearly feels he's got quite a lot of moral ammunition. He's described a situation where he and his family are unsafe. He says he faces daily calls online for him to be murdered. And he's attacked the Times explicitly for publishing a photograph of his house, which, of course, is a photograph of his house that he himself has published before while standing outside it. Does a by-election make any difference to any of that, though?
Well, it doesn't change any of the dynamics. Certainly, as a taxpayer myself, I think that our MPs should be better protected. It is absolutely critical that we look after all people who secure and hold public office. Nigel Farage is not special in terms of the attacks that are focused on him. I wish that wasn't happening to him. I wish it wasn't happening to any of our MPs. But there is something I genuinely find odd about his positioning, which is that he describes himself as the most attacked MP.
Yeah.
In the last decade, 2 members of our parliament have been murdered. They've been murdered. And the Prime Minister's house was firebombed. Large numbers of female MPs have experienced stalking. Some of that leading to kind of exactly. And rape is threatened against them on a regular basis online. None of that excuses people calling for Nigel Farage to be murdered or threatening to kill him. Those things should not happen. If people make credible threats against Nigel Farage, they should be arrested by the police and punished, no question. But there's a sort of positioning of himself as uniquely a victim here that feels just genuinely baffling. I cannot understand how he did not notice Jo Cox and David Amess being murdered.
Well, I mean, there's also the question, Danny, of how any of that relates to a by-election. You can't cast a vote to stop this happening.
The security, first of all, let me just endorse what both Polly and Sally have said about the need for security for members of Parliament. And actually, maybe I do slightly differ. I can see why, because of Nigel Farage's prominence and controversy, along with some MPs, he might be in more danger. Although you correctly point out that 2 murders took place of MPs who didn't fall in that category. So all MPs are definitely in danger. So I do get it, but just on
whether he's reported any of it to the police? Because I mean, one of the things when I read his stuff was I thought, this is really serious. Has he reported this? And has he talked to the House authorities who now take security of MPs really seriously? And I just wonder whether he's actually not done what other people do and is doing it on his own, but I just don't know.
I don't want to use too much of our time here talking about what is effectively a sort of MacGuffin, which they use in films to get the plot going. It's got nothing to do with security. Christopher Harborne, a cryptocurrency billionaire, out of the goodness of his heart, by the way, gave money to the most pro-cryptocurrency politician Britain has ever had. And he's also being supported by another cryptocurrency gambler, right? And this has caused a lot of justifiable newspaper stories where readers and the electorate can take whatever view they want about the propriety of it. But there's also rules about it, and the rules and the electorate's view of the propriety of it are what's at issue. Now, Clacton is only a small slice of the electorate. There certainly will be some people who think nothing that Nigel Farage does matters because they all do it, which they, by the way, do not. And also, the most important thing is that he be supported bringing down the establishment. And there are constituencies in the country and a constituency for that. Reform has part of that vote which will not go away, as we've discussed before, that really believes that. And this could be a good move to mobilise those people, make them feel even more strongly about it. But in reality, most of the country, I think, will not think that. I think he is undermining his more general position, and that general position was, I'm going to professionalise reform, I'm going to make myself look like a credible Prime Minister, I'm going to invite people like Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman who might undermine our populist element but increase our governing ability into the party, and Danny Kruger. And he has been forced off that strategy by Restore and now by this, and he's now running a different strategy. So he's gone back to what one might call a base vote strategy, and their base vote's about 25%, right? And it may be that even that base vote's undermined by it, but it wasn't his strategy to only get the base vote. So therefore, this is a recognition of a change in strategy which Makerfield started, and this is completed.
Sally, I mean, look, he did win Clacton last time, but he only won in 2024 with 42% of the vote. Is it a given that he wins a by-election?
I mean, he must be. The expectation I assume, is that he will win. I mean, this is about the most reform place there is, and has been for a long time, which is why he's there. So I would guess he will, but it's going to be interesting. I assume Restore will be out there. I mean, it won't be as straightforward. It won't be as straightforward for him as it was last time. And also, I do think, I think Danny's right. I think that core vote will not be as solid as it was, because there will be elements of that core vote whose lives are absolutely awful and just think, well, hang on, I thought you were like us and you understood us, but this doesn't tally. So I think it might be possible to splinter some of that in a way that won't be good for him.
In 2008, David Davis called a mildly impenetrable by-election on the issue of civil liberties, and both Labour and the Lib Dems responded by deciding not to stand. Is there an example there that parties could follow in this case? What would you advise them to do if you were advising them?
I think it's exactly the right tactic, to be honest, is that this is weird, right? Like, it's possibly a sort of ruse to get out of investigation. And a recall by election because he's found to have breached conduct rules. It's not clear whether it would in fact lead to those investigations falling or not. But I think for the other parties to sort of recoil in confusion and say, like, this is just weird. You're the MP, you were elected for a 5-year term, you should stay. Why are you wasting taxpayers' money on this? Would be by far the best tactic. Now, Reform have suggested, as I understand it, that they will cover the costs of the by-election. But even it's still weird. Like, I'm sorry, what? So you just, like, what a stupid thing to spend money on. And actually, I think that then furthers this sense of, like, who are you weird rich people who just, like, spend money on frivolous stuff? The people who might then fight it, though, are Restore, because if anyone's got the argument to take on and the personal animus against Nigel Farage, it probably is Rupert Lowe. And so, and if it becomes, I mean, I expect Camp Vinface or somebody will also run, but if it becomes essentially just a two-way battle between the two oddballs of the far right of our politics, that's the only way in which it possibly turns out badly, I think.
I mean, I suppose the only alternative is way back, the sort of, Tatton cleaning up politics, Mr. Whitesuit sort of, could there be an anti-Farage candidate who says, actually, we want to clean up, we're going to clean up politics?
You'd have to have a particular kind of candidate because
big ass.
Yeah, because obviously he's not, what he's proposing is that it's the establishment that's out to get him. So someone like Martin Bell, the party's actually uniting and becoming what they would call then the uni party. I don't think that would work. But I do think it's very important not to accept the idea that it's some sort of coup. I mean, anyone can resign as an MP, right? So I think he is been forced to act out of weakness because he has not gained the momentum towards becoming the absolute dominant force on the right that he intended to become. The Conservatives are now 4 points behind him in the polls. Kemi Badenoch is more popular than him. I, as you know, don't think Reform is going away. I think they're a bigger party. So if the Conservative Party is dreaming that it'll just sort of disappear, that won't happen either. So this is not about, my feelings about the Conservative Party, but you can see Nigel Farage and his attempt to become more than a kind of turbulent populist party. This is a big setback to that. And be very important not to get drawn into what are effectively fake arguments about whether this is about the security of his family and all that sort of stuff. He the Times was revealing the fact that he had multiple properties and the relationship with the cryptocurrency fraudster. So it's not unreasonable that it's ended up publishing a number of stories on the subject. The idea that that's some sort of establishment coup or something is just sort of childish, really.
Well, he is quite Trumpian, Danny, isn't it? Because it's that sort of, well, I'm going to sue the paper. I mean, that's just classic Trump.
Yes.
Danny, if you're him, who are you more worried about? Are you more worried about Restore, or are you more worried about some kind of, I'm not quite sure how it would work, but kind of vague sort of liberal anti-reform type person?
Running against him in the constituency. Yeah. I'm not, to be honest, I don't think he'd have done this if he didn't think, which I think we ought to think right from the beginning, that he wasn't going to win the seat back. Yeah. What I think he should be worried about is that the coup de theatre doesn't work. That it works technically. He gets back into the constituency. The other parties don't fight him, but Restore does. He then, gets 70-30 on. But at the end of it, he's just re-won Clacton, which he had to start off with, and everybody thinks he's eccentric. I watched that broadcast as you did. You had a sort of more colourful reaction than I did, Hugo. But I did think he wasn't fully in control of himself, and I don't think British people want that as their prime minister. So I think he is less likely to be prime minister now than when he got up to make that speech, and that's the test, really. I don't think it's like the end of everything. I don't think he's certain that he won't, do okay out of this manoeuvre, because there are pluses and minuses of this tactic. But I think it's a setback, and it's a setback. It's a sort of setback move that he's made because he's on the back foot and for no other reason.
Yeah. I mean, I thought his statement was extraordinary, and I thought the reason why it was extraordinary was because he's got into that position you never want to be in, where you're outlining a position in full confidence that all reasonable people will agree with you, and you might be wrong. And he sounded angry about the wrong bits. He sounded confident in the wrong bits, and it didn't strike me that he'd come across as being appealing to the people he needs to be appealing to. Let's talk about though what happens. The by-election goes ahead. We have to assume that he wins it. Parliamentary rules say the standards investigation into him will be suspended while he's not a member, but can continue if and when he is re-elected, which means he could then face sanctions and a by-election after the by-election. Polly, do you think is that likely?
I think if it is, we'll all just have to kind of quit politics, right? Because it'll just be so dull.
Sally?
I think it's quite likely. I mean, once the house gets stuck into these things, they become pretty single-minded in my experience, and so actually they'll say, we're doing the investigation, we're doing it properly, we'll have to pause it, but we'll pick it back up. And so I think it would just take its course.
Well, he can't. They can't do anything else other than do that. There's always a problem with a quasi-judicial system that involves a lot of MPs in it, and that is problematic, particularly for parties which don't have very many MPs and therefore wouldn't be represented on it. But the truth is that it looks to me like it was a breaking of the rules, and therefore a judgment has to be made, and then they have to look at his record of breaking the rules and other things, and then make a punishment related to that. They can't be put off by this. He can do what, he can't sort of make Parliament or anybody else just do what he wants because he's decided he's going to resign. It's up to him if he wants to do that. I think it is what he's trying to do, of course, is create a situation whereby he might be suspended from Parliament, but nobody tries a recall petition. That's a possibility. But what he's losing out of all this, and there are so many different ways the actual individual things could go, but what he's losing out of all this is what he was trying to create, which is they're a serious force that is not cranky, split, a bit off the wall. He's playing into that. In fact, what he's saying is, I'm really not any of these smooth establishment people. I'm something completely different. I'm going to tear up the rule book. And there is a section of the population that wants that. But there's also a section of his vote that doesn't actually want that. That Luke Trill of More in Common does a lot of voter segmentation. It's very interesting. And a proportion of the Reform vote are kind of rooted patriot conservative types. They don't want to burn the system down. And Farage understood that, and he's been reaching out to those people and then trying to reach out beyond those people. And I've compared his strategy. It's very similar to David Cameron's, but just or Tony Blair's, but just in a different context. And he has now been pushed off that. And that's the significance of today and of the last couple of weeks. Makerfield, which is when I first made the observation this would happen, and then this.
Sally, one way this might work for him, though, is that Andy Burnham no longer owns the summer, right? And until he stood up, the summer was all about Andy Burnham becoming prime minister. Who knows? Perhaps even, as we discussed last week, riding in on the back of an England World Cup victory. Now the summer is all about Nigel Farage and his by-election, and he's taking a lot of the political oxygen during the season when traditionally the press is hunting for stuff to write about.
He will own some of it. I think people will get bored with this quite quickly, actually. I think, I think you're underestimating the impact of a new prime minister coming in and forming a government and setting out a broad strategic direction, assuming he does that. will have. And then, to be blunt, Hugo, people go on holiday. So, I mean, I don't know when the by-election will be, but I think there'll be a noisy peak for a little bit, but I don't think it'll go on day after day.
Even more than that is that to the extent to which it does get coverage, especially if the other parties don't run, the coverage will be about how bad are Nigel Farage's transgressions.
Yeah.
Instead, like what he wants is to be wittering on about small boats. A by-election in Clacton is not about small boats or like supposed rapist immigrants. It's just about like whether Nigel Farage scammed the rules or not.
Correct.
Wrong topic.
This is very important. He has made one of the great issues of British politics his personal finances. Yes. He's calling a by-election to discuss them. And I suggest we all take, I think that's reasonable for him. That's nice for him to ask, and let's engage in the discussion.
What do we think then about the big victor of this by-election just being apathy, that everyone turns into Brenda from Bristol, throws up their hands and goes, you know what, we just can't be bothered with any more of this?
I think that the victor in this by-election is actually the other mainstream parties, because I think he's been forced off the agenda that he wanted to be on, and he's chosen to do that, but whether it's out of pique or desperation. But so I actually think the other parties, they won't. I'm not saying they're going to win or do brilliantly well, but I think actually in terms of the sort of political space, I think it's bad for reform and better for the rest.
Look, finally then, do we all think that the other parties should stand? I'd like to know what you think about that, but I know Polly doesn't. Well, Danny and Sally, what do you think?
No. Well, look, we're doing it. I'm sure they'll make their position known, possibly even before people get to hear what we have to say. But my inclination would be not to. But I haven't sat down and thought through very carefully the implications of that. I think my implication would be not to, and then to let Nigel Farage fight against a sort of. There is a danger, of course, the Greens fight and. Then Labour and the Tories don't fight. That's of course a possibility. But I think might become so eccentric, the by-election, centred around this issue of his money and cryptocurrency and things like that, maybe it would be better not to stand, but those issues still be put.
God, I wish I knew how to launch a cryptocurrency. I'd launch a Farage by-election in Clacton cryptocurrency immediately. I'd make a killing out of mad people. Look, thank you very much indeed for following the bat signal. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Polly. And thank you, Danny. They're all taking off their bat costumes now and returning to Wayne Manor. We'll be back soon with your more regular How to Win an Election.